Let's learn some new adverbs organized by the categories that we saw in Lesson 3. Let's quickly review what we've learned previously at the statue, the butcher's stand, and the bread stand. At the statue, we previously learned no to mean not or no, and sí to mean yes or the opposite of not. At the butcher's stand, we learned muy to mean very, and at the bread stand, we learned ya to mean anymore. These are our primary landmarks in the plaza, and now we're going to fill in some more details around them. First of all, when Joel arrives at the plaza today, he runs into the statue in the middle. He's still dehydrated and a bit hungry now, and in such situations he tends to be weak and a bit clumsy. So when Joel runs into the statue, his head gets stuck in a big hole at the edge of the statue. He's confused and looks around from this new position because his head is sticking out of the other side of the hole inside the fountain. When he sees the statue above him, he says, "Hello." But to say this, he says, "Hola." So the stressed syllable here is ol, which is kind of like hole, which is what his head's stuck in, but the H is silent, so it's just hola. Next, he sees a patch of grass on the statue, and in his state of confusion, he thinks that this grass might be food. Maybe it's a steak made of grass-fed beef. Joel is very thankful to the statue. "Thank you, this is the grassiest grass-fed beef I've ever received." To say thank you, Joel says gracias, which sounds a little bit like grassiest, but it means thank you. But the nearby butcher yells back to Joel, "That's not real beef. You have to buy from a real butcher, not a statue." Then it occurs to Joel that this patch of grass is not meat. In fact, it's not food at all. Joel is disappointed and says, "Oh." These three words, hola, gracias, and oh, are all interjections. So these are exclamations that are often used all by themselves, not in a sentence. Now, the place that we're keeping these is actually roughly a new location. It's in front of the statue, not on the statue itself. It's kind of below it. But now Joel flies up to the statue's face to examine it. Is this a real person? Joel stares into the statue's eyes. He's decided that if he can see that it has a soul, then it's a real person. Because only real people have souls. One of the statue's eyes is open, and the other one is closed. So Joel stares into the open eye and says, "Only a real person has a soul." But the word he uses to say this is solo. So he says, "Solo a real person has a soul." The statue's eye, which looks like a big round circle with a mark over it, which is his eyebrow. This looks like the letter O with an accent mark, and that helps to represent the word solo with an accent mark over the first O, which means only. For example, only a real person has a soul. The statue's other eye, however, is closed, and the eyebrow makes it look like a question mark because it's so twisted up. Joel remembers the question marks that he created at the Ferris wheel earlier today, and he's surprised. He says, "Did I create enough question marks to go everywhere, even the statue's face?" But when Joel says, "even the statue's face," he says, "hasta the statue's face." So the word hasta, which we already learned at the Ferris wheel, means even when it's used as an adverb. For example, to say, "That's so easy, even I can do it," Joel would say, "That's so easy, hasta yo can do it." Or to say, "My question marks went everywhere, even here," he would say, "My question marks went everywhere, hasta here." After Joel stares at the statue's two eyes for a while, solo and hasta, Joel finally concludes that it doesn't have a soul. However, he thinks that it needs a name anyway, and he says, "I'm going to call it Tom." Then something catches Joel's eye. "Wow, Tom," he tells the statue, There's something in your ear. Yep, you have money in your ear, Tom. Sure enough, there's a rolled up yen in Tom's ear. Let's see if there's yen in the other ear also, says Joel. He looks in the left ear and, yep, there's a bill of yen there as well. Cool, there's yen in this ear too, says Joel. But to say too or also, he uses the word también, which means also. So notice this word has the stress on yen, but it has the unstressed syllable tam, so también. These three words, solo, hasta, and también, are used roughly the same way. Let's try creating an example that uses each one right before a noun. So how about, yes, everything, even the house? That would be sí, todo, hasta the house. How about, yes, everyone, even him? That would be sí, todos, hasta él. How about, yes, I, and also she? That would be sí, yo, también ella. And then how about, no, not much, only one thing? That would be no, no much, solo una thing. So notice from these examples that they're all structured basically the same way, and the adverb is happening right before a noun in these cases. But we could simply use these words before an entire sentence. For example, I only want her to be fine would be solo I want que ella esté bien.
Solo quiero que ella esté bien.
We could change this out for any of the other adverbs here. I also want her to be fine would be también I want que ella esté bien. Or I even want her to be fine would be hasta I want que ella esté bien. It's interesting to note that we could also use no and sí in these cases as well, and it would still work. So I don't want her to be well would be no I want que ella esté bien. And I do want her to be well would be sí I want que ella esté bien. Now that Joel has confirmed that the statue is not a living soul, and now that he's gotten a little bit of free money from Tom, as he calls the statue, he goes over to the steak stand. Now remember that the landmark we've already learned here is muy, to mean very. But Joel doesn't buy anything at the butcher's stand today because he sees something freaky happen here. The butcher is just about to talk to Joel about the steak, but suddenly a cloud moves away from the sun, and the butcher is struck by sunlight. Immediately, the previously pale butcher gets a total tan. A tan so dark that he's almost as red as the meat that he sells. Joel finds this very peculiar. How can the butcher tan so quickly? And why is he as red as the meat? To say so quickly, Joel says tan quickly. The word tan means so in this sense. So as you can see, it's actually exchangeable with the word muy. Something can be so red or tan red, or it can be very red or muy red. So when you think about the steak stand, remember primarily the words muy and tan. You can use these to modify a variety of things. Now, Joel doesn't want to mess with the butcher once he's tanned like this, so next he goes over to the baker's stand. Here, Joel sees something strange. A bunch of people are in line wanting to buy bread. But as always, the baker doesn't want to sell it to them. Today, the baker has come up with a new tactic. He's trying to confuse everyone with some strange, arbitrary rules for how to wait in line. He's painted some instructions on the front of his stand that insist that the ladies go first. But instead of saying ladies first, the baker shouts out over and over again, aunties before uncles. Then, every time either a man or a woman approaches, he asks, are you an auntie? And if she says no, He responds, "Well, I can't sell bread to you. I have to serve the aunties first." Now, the word here is antes. This word basically means beforehand or first, and it's used in a variety of ways to indicate that something happens before something else. For now, just remember that the baker insists on serving aunties antes, or beforehand. Of course, in reality, he doesn't want to sell bread at all. To verify this, Joel cuts to the front of the line, and he insists, "I'm an auntie." When Joel approaches, he's surprised by a rope that's stretching all the way around the edge of the stand. Now remember that previously the stand slammed closed on the tip of the baker's knife. So Joel asks, how is it that this rope didn't break? The baker's happy to talk about something other than bread and says, "Oh yeah, that rope, that's the finest hemp rope in the world. It's always there. It never breaks." Joel is impressed and he says, "How long have you had this same hemp rope around your stand?" The baker says, "Always." But to say this, he uses the word siempre. So this word stresses a syllable that sounds like hemp without the H, siempre. Now notice that the hemp rope stretches all the way around the edges of the entire stand, which means for us that it represents all time or always. Think of this baker's stand as a diagram of adverbs related to time. The knife that we use to learn the word ya represents already or now, and that's sticking out of the middle of the stand. So the word ya only takes up a small moment of time in the present or the middle of the stand. Now, if siempre surrounds the entire stand for always, and ya takes up a small moment of time in the middle, where would we put the word for never? Well, this word isn't on the stand at all. The baker is hiding something behind the stand, and he never gets it out, as you're about to see. Joel asks, "Do you have any new, freshly baked bread?" The baker says, "Yes, of course, it's behind the stand here, but I only sell it at noon, so you'll have to come back then." Joel doubts that the baker is serious, but he tells him, "Okay, I'll order 2 loaves of new bread. Here, you can have my yen," and he gives him 10 yen. "I'll be back at noon to pick it up." Then Joel flies around for a few minutes, even though he's dehydrated and hungry, and he comes back at exactly 12 p.m. "Okay, it's noon," he tells the baker. "Where's the new bread that I ordered?" "You're too late," says the baker. "It's a few seconds after noon now, so it's not available." Of course, Joel concludes that when the baker says noon, what he really means is never. So Joel's new word for never is nunca, which stresses the syllable noon. He's concluded that noon is a time that doesn't exist because you can either be before it or after it, but it's never truly noon. Joel is pretty angry and tells the baker, "I want what I ordered, and I want it now." As he says this, he slams his fist down on the biggest loaf of bread in the center of the stand. And what he says is, "I want my order ahora." The word ahora, which has a lot of emphasis and sounds kind of like the word order, means now. Just then, there's a strange ringing sound like a high-pitched buzz. Bzzz. One of the ears of grain sitting on the stand is ringing. The baker tells everyone, "Oh, that means it's 5 o'clock, closing time. I'll see you all tomorrow." Joel is baffled. "What do you mean 5 o'clock? It was just now noon." "No," says the baker. "You see these ears of grain lying around here? Their ringtones are always correct. This particular ringtone means it's 5 p.m., and if the tone says it's 5 o'clock, then it's 5 o'clock. To say this, the baker actually says, if the tone says it's 5 o'clock, entonces it's 5 o'clock. The word entonces, with a stress on tone, means then. The baker has a bunch of wheat ears lying around the stand to represent this. Then could be in the past or in the future, and it's often used in logical ways. If the tone says that it's 5 o'clock, then it's 5 o'clock. Of course, for the baker, these wheat ears are just a gimmick to close his shop whenever he wants. Now, before we move on to some examples, make sure you can remember all of the words from the baker's stand. In the middle, we have ya and ahora. These refer to the present moment. Entonces is all around them because then can happen at pretty much any time. Siempre is around the edges because it represents all time. Nunca is behind the stand because it represents no time. And then, of course, if you look at the line of people, we have antes first, or antes. So if antes means beforehand, there's actually an idiom that's much more common than antes all by itself. The two words antes de are used to mean before. So you'll follow this by a noun. For example, to say before tomorrow, you would say antes de tomorrow. Before tonight is antes de esta night, for this night. Here's a sentence example. We're going before tonight, or we're going before this night. We're going antes de esta night.
Vamos antes de esta noche.
Almost any of the adverbs at the bread stand can be used all by itself somewhere in a sentence. For example, she always knows it all would be she siempre knows it all. This would be ella siempre lo knows todo.
Ella siempre lo sabe todo.
As another example, to say I now have it all, I could say ya lo I have todo. Or if I'm not referring to something that recently changes, I could just say I have it all right now, or ahora lo I have todo. We also have a couple of idioms that have to do with these adverbs related to time. So, for example, para entonces. So, para entonces seems to mean for then, but it's used to mean by that time. So, para entonces is by that time. For example, she will have left by that time would be she will have left para entonces. Now, there's something complicated that happens with nunca. I mentioned earlier that Joel uses double negatives. So instead of better than ever, Joel would say better than never. It's hard to make this make sense for most English speakers, but it makes perfect sense to Spanish speakers. So for example, I got better than ever, or I was better than ever, Joel could say, estuve mejor que nunca. To say, I have more money than ever, he would say, I have más money que nunca. We also have an idiom involving nunca that's used in some cultures. The idiom nunca está de más doesn't translate directly at all. It seems to mean it's never of more, but it roughly means it couldn't hurt. Now, since this idiom is a complete sentence all by itself, don't worry about modifying it all. I just recommend saying it a few times as is. Nunca está de más, or it couldn't hurt. Now we're going to visit the fruit stand and the veggie stand for adverbs related to location and the way that things can be done. Let's recall that at the fruit stand we previously learned aquí to mean here, and at the monkey's stand we learned como to mean as, and bien to mean well. When Joel arrives at the fruit stand, he's frightened to see a spider. He shouts, "Ay, there's a spider on your fruit there." The fruit merchant says, "Where is it?" And Joel responds, "Ahí." Ahí roughly means there. Now, the spider is on the basket of fruit, but it's closer to the fruit stand owner, so instead of saying here, Joel is saying there. Joel says, Your fruit is spider-infested. I could report you for this. The fruit merchant doesn't like the sound of that idea at all, so he quickly tries to distract Joel. He says, hey, look at the beautiful sunrise. It's dawn. But of course, it was just noon. Now it's early afternoon, so why is the fruit merchant saying it's dawn? Joel looks back and forth and says, I don't see the sunrise anywhere. What are you talking about? Where am I supposed to look? The fruit merchant improvises to make up for what he just said. He says, what I meant is, look at that melon hanging right there. It looks like a sunrise. It's a dawn day melon. Once again, Joel is confused. There are 2 slices of melon hanging up, one on each side of the stand, and they both look like pictures of the sunrise because of the way that they're colored. So again, he says, where do you want me to look? But to ask this, he uses the word dónde. He says, ¿Dónde do you want me to look? This word dónde sounds kind of like dawn day, and what it means is where in questions. So these 2 melons are hanging up above the fruit stand to represent Joel's confusion because he doesn't know where to look. Now, based on the way that we've arranged these words with dónde above and aquí and ahí underneath, you can see that you could ask the question ¿Dónde?, but then answer it with aquí or ahí. Now let's quickly learn an idiom using ¿Dónde? So ¿Dónde estar literally means where to be. But as an idiom, it indicates a place to be or a place to stay. So if somebody doesn't have a place to stay, you might say that they don't have ¿Dónde estar? For example, this time she doesn't have a place to be. Esta time, no, she has ¿Dónde estar? There's also an idiom that uses ahí. So we've already learned that por means by or near somewhere, so we could say por aquí to mean around here. But the idiom por ahí is very frequently used to mean around in a vague sense. For example, someone might ask, where is he? And they answer, oh, he's around, or está por ahí. And then as yet another idiom, if you put por before ¿Dónde?, you get an idiom that has to do with how far somebody is. For example, if somebody's reading your favorite book and you want to ask them, oh, how far are you? You might simply ask, ¿Por dónde estás? Joel is annoyed at the crazy fruit merchant with his spiders and his dawn day melons, so he goes over to the vegetable stand. Once again, he's struck by admiration of the farmer's interesting hairdo. He asks the farmer, how do you comb your hair that way? Now, when Joel asks this, he uses the word como. So it's, como do you comb your hair that way? This word is a lot like one of the words that we learned in Lesson 3, C-O-M-O, but it has an accent mark over the first O. Como? The word como is used in questions, and it simply means how. As a joke, the farmer answers, muy bien. So he's very proud of the way that he combs his hair, and to answer the how question, he just uses bien, which means well, as if to say, I comb it well. Yes, says Joel, I can see that, but how exactly do you do it? The farmer answers, like this, as you see. And he picks up a comb and once again combs the top of a carrot. Just comb it así, as you see, like this. So the word así means like this or like that. For example, if I asked you, how did you get the work done? I might say, ¿Cómo did you get the work done? And then you could simply answer, así, and demonstrate. So once again, notice how the words are arranged. It's very much like at the fruit stand where we had the question, ¿Dónde?, and then the answers, aquí and ahí. Here at the vegetable stand, the monkey's hair is above the stand for ¿Cómo?, and then on the stand itself, we have various answers to this question. Bien, así, and then the version of ¿Cómo that is not used in a question without an accent mark, which means as, and is followed by a phrase. For example, if I ask you, how did you get it done, I could use como to ask that question. And then if you wanted to say, I did it as my friend does it, or the way my friend does it, you could say, I did it como my friend does it in your answer. Now here are a couple more idiomatic ways to use these adverbs. Así generally means this way or that way, but you could also use it in the idiom así que, which basically just means so at the beginning of a phrase. For example, to say, I'm reading so I can't, could be estoy reading, así que I can't. We can also put the word que after como in a question, and this creates the idiom como que. This is actually generally an exclamation of disbelief. So let me give you a scenario. Suppose I think that a friend is around, and you say that he's not here. I might say, what do you mean he's not here? That would be como que he's not here. So como que basically means what do you mean, but it's just used as an exclamation. It's not really a question. So for example, what do you mean he's not around? Como que no está? Or maybe, what do you mean you're not well? Como que no estás bien? We're almost done here, but before we leave the marketplace, we have just one more idiom, and that's related to the English word as. So remember that the butcher turned almost as red as the steak. When we say that something is as red as something, or as good as something, or as lonely as someone, it doesn't translate directly into Spanish. That's actually an English idiom. Joel's idiom is different. He always says, so good as something, or so red as something. That would be tan bueno como algo. So to say, as lonely as someone, he would say, tan lonely como someone. We'll continue practicing the idiomatic phrases later on, but first make sure you can write down all of your adverbs from memory, location by location. Then we'll move on to some new adjectives and nouns.